I will cover the issues related to the tax incentives introduced by Ukrainian Parliament for the period of quarantine. Also, I will talk about different tax exemptions, postponement of the tax audits, and possibility to postpone tax payments. In general, all these measures are aimed at supporting business during this difficult period. But I will also share with you my thoughts about whether such measures are really sufficient and satisfactory for the business. As Olesya has already mentioned, on Monday, Ukrainian Parliament voted for another law providing some additional incentives for the business during the quarantine. The majority of them are related to production, circulation, and importing different sanitizers and medicines and other goods that are necessary for combating coronavirus. I will not cover these issues in my presentation and will focus mostly on the general questions that that may be applicable for all the business. Now I will share the presentation. Let me do this. 1 minute. Okay. Do you see it right now? Katerina, could you please comment?
Yes, thank you, Iryna. We can see.
Right?
We can see everything. Yeah, thank you. Wonderful.
Okay, great. Thank you, colleagues. In order not to lose any questions, I suggest to do the following. I will finish my presentation, and in the end, I will answer all the questions if it will be comfortable for you. Thank you. Let me start from the tax audits during the quarantine period. What is important here? Well, first, all the documentary audits and physical audits, both on-site and off-site, scheduled and unscheduled, are prohibited till the end of the May. If we're talking about audits on single social contributions, they're also prohibited, supposedly also till the end of the May. Previously, it was till 18th of May, but again, according to the new law 3275, which was voted on Monday, this period of ban on tax audits is extended for the single social contribution as well. Let me also mention that there are some exceptions to this rule, and we will talk about this later. So the general rule is that all the audits, unscheduled and scheduled, are banned for the whole period of quarantine till the end of the May. But there are two questions, very interesting. What about those audits that have started previously and have not been completed yet during the period of quarantine? What about them? So those documentary and factual audits that were started before 18th of March and are not completed, they are suspended till the end of the May. And please keep in mind that the tax audit is completed when you have the act from the tax authorities. If there is no act, then the tax audit is not completed. If we're talking about those audits that were scheduled for the period of quarantine, then these audits will be postponed and will be included in the new updated plan. So please check the information letters from the State Fiscal Service, and you will see the updated plan there. Now will be very important information. All these bans and prohibitions on the tax audit is not applicable for the following cases. First, documentary unscheduled audits related to value-added tax, as well as desk audits. What does this mean? It means that if you file the tax return with the application for VAT refund, or for instance, with declaration of the VAT negative value, then tax audit is permitted. Also, according to the law 3275, factual audits regarding violation of the legislative requirements on production and circulation of ethanol, alcoholic beverages, and tobacco fuel are also permitted. If to summarize the information about the audits, we should remember two very important things. First, all the audits are prohibited except of those that are related to value-added tax. All the audits related to VAT, the requests, the audits, any other controlling measures, they are still allowed. If you're in the process of the tax audit and, for instance, you have the act, you still need to challenge this act, for instance, to file objections to the act, or if you have already tax notice decision, you still have to contest them and to raise objections to them according to the procedure established in the tax code. It is very important in order not to lose time that is established in the tax code. What are other control measures that tax authorities may continue to implement even during the period of quarantine? On this slide, you can see them. First, it is submission of request for provision of information. Everybody knows such requests that tax office send really often to taxpayers. Nobody cancels this right of the tax office, and if you receive such request, you still need to send the answer. Then cross-verifications and, of course, system of monitoring and blocking of tax invoices is still working, and it was not stopped or terminated. If we're talking about new measures that were introduced by the law 3275, on this slide you will see also very important information. So the following terms and periods are suspended again till the end of the May. First is the term for consideration of taxpayers' complaints in the administrative appeal. They are suspended till the end of the May. What does this mean? It means that if you, for instance, file the objections or a complaint on the tax notice decision in the administrative appeal, then the period for consideration by tax office of your complaint is suspended till the end of the May. In other words, you will have more time for preparation for the court. So I think that this provision is more beneficial for taxpayers. The same rule is applicable for the complaints regarding single social contribution. Again, the term for consideration of all complaints is suspended till the end of the May. Another important information regarding response for the request for information from tax offices. We all know that according to the general rule, taxpayers have to file the response within 15 days. According to the new law 3275, this period is suspended till the end of the May. Please take into consideration that this does not mean that you can just forget about this request and not to answer it. We really do not recommend to do this. In general, when you are facing the request from the tax office, we always recommend to reply to it, of course, in writing with a proper grounding. For instance, if you know that you is not obliged to file any documents or information on this request, please write the proper grounding in your response and submit it in a due time. So if now your company receives the request from tax office, we recommend again to reply to this request, and not till the end of the May, but within the reasonable time, for instance, within 1 week, and to explain that according to the new law 3275, for instance, you have the time till the end of the May to provide the requested information and documents, if you really decide to give this information to the tax office. Also, the term for providing individual tax consultation in writing is suspended till the end of the May, and the term for submission of single contribution pairs complaints, which should be filed from 8 March. So this is briefly about tax audits and prohibition of the tax audits and what other control measures tax authorities still have the right to conduct. Now I suggest to move to the tax exemptions and benefits during the quarantine. We received one question before the webinar about whether there are some additional tax exemptions for the large taxpayers. Unfortunately, there are no additional or special tax benefit for the large taxpayers as for now currently. We all know that the professional organization regularly submit some offers and proposals and suggestions to the Ukrainian parliament and asking them to provide really like a suitable incentives for the business that will help to survive during this difficult period. So I think that probably some additional measures may be introduced in the nearest future, but currently there are no exceptions for the large taxpayers. So let me start from the land payment and land tax. There is a release from the obligation to pay land payment that includes land tax and real estate tax for the state and communal land plots. But very important now, this release is valid only for March, but not April. These changes were again introduced by the new law 3275. So previously, this release was valid for 2 months, March and April, but currently it is valid only for the March. So in April, you still need to pay this tax. If your company has already submitted the adjusted tax declaration regarding the payment of the land tax or real estate tax, now you will have to submit another adjustment declaration and declare that you're still paying the tax for the April. If we're talking about land plots, very important clarification that only those land plots that are used in the business or commercial activity may be released from the obligation to pay land tax. In other words, if you do not use your land plot in your commercial activity, so you will still need to pay the land tax. The second, the term of submission of the annual declaration on property status and income is postponed till the end of July. Respectively, the obligation to pay taxes is also postponed till the 1st of October instead of the 1st of August. The third incentive that is very, I think, important and crucial for the majority of the huge business with a large number of employees. And this question was very painful, I think, for the majority of companies, whether the companies are still obliged to pay payroll taxes and single social contribution from salaries. So currently, the incentives are only for the individual entrepreneurs, including those who are used simplified tax system and individuals who carry out independent social activity and members of the farms. Only those individuals are exempt and released from the obligation to pay single social contribution till the end of the April, and only for themselves. It means that employers are still obliged to pay single social contribution for their employees. Again, important information, in 2020, local governments have the right to adopt some additional decisions on reduction of the single tax rates. But this information is important only for the single taxpayers on the first and second groups, who are paying a single tax on the rates that is introduced by the local governments. Let's move to the tax fines and penalties during the quarantine. The general rule is that till the end of the May, the penalty is not charged. And if the penalty was charged, it will be written off. With fines, the information is more comprehensive. So the fines are not applied to the tax violations that were committed during the period of quarantine. Period of quarantine for the tax purposes, it's in the majority of cases till the end of the May. For single social contributions, previously it was till the end of the April, but again, according to the changes introduced by the law 3275, all periods and incentives for single social contribution will be extended till the end of the May as well. Moreover, fines are not applied for non-registration or or ultimately or untimely registration of the tax invoices or adjustment calculation in the Unified Register of Tax Invoices. So if you were not able to file the tax invoice for registration on time, there will be no fines or penalties for this. So let's move further. There is one question that I decided to make on the separate slide. Is it possible not to pay payroll tax from the salaries? Why this question arises? Because someone may think that if there is no penalties for non-payment of the tax till the end of the May, then probably employers can avoid payment of the payroll tax. But it is not like this, unfortunately. Payroll tax as well as the single social contribution still need to be paid from the salaries. There is additional clarification from the National Bank of Ukraine regarding the banks who are processing these payments, and the banks also told that they're not able to accept the payments of the salaries without the confirmation of the payment of single social contribution. And again, exceptions to the fines. So fines will be applied for the following violations that you now see on the screen. First, it is breach of requirements for long-term life insurance agreements or non-state pension insurance agreements, in particular supplementary pension insurance. Second, alienation of tax-pledged property without the consent of the controlling body. Then violations of the legislative requirements on production and circulation of ethanol, alcoholic beverages, and tobacco and fuel. This is a novelty according to the law 3275. The fines will be applied for the carrying out operations on sale of fuel and ethanol without registration of economic entities as the excise taxpayers, and for the violation of calculation, declaration, and payment of VAT and rent. So in general, we should remember that there are no incentives for VAT, as well as for the audits regarding VAT and payment of VAT. I believe that this is briefly all the main information that you should know about tax incentives that were recently introduced. And now I will be happy to